Why was everyone laughing when she hadn't said a word? The sound started small, a ripple of snickers in the humid tent, but Anya Petrova heard every note of it. She always did. Private Tanaka's tablet glowed blue across his face, his grin half hidden as he nudged the soldier beside him. Duboce stifled a laugh, her shoulders shaking. The joke wasn't spoken loudly, but she didn't need the volume to understand the mockery. It was written in the tone, in the sideways glances, in the way their voices carried youth's arrogance, so certain that anything old was useless. Anya kept her back to them, her posture stiff, her silver-gray hair bound into a severe bun that looked almost painful. Her hands lined and hardened by decades of use, pressed flat against the supply crate as she unrolled what they thought was her shame. A map. Not digital, not polymer laminated, not the sleek satellite-fed displays they had been trained to worship. This was yellowed cloth, its creases deep as scars, its ink faded to the color of dusk. Spidery script, hand-drawn contours, symbols from another time, a relic, a ghost. She ran one finger along a faint contour line, slow, deliberate, tracing memory. They laughed louder. "Look at that thing," Tanaka whispered, cruel confidence dripping from his voice. "Probably used it to hunt mammoths." Duboce bit her lip to contain her giggle. "My grandpa's attic has one just like it, fire hazard." They didn't know she could hear them, or maybe they thought she wouldn't care. But she cared. Not with anger, not with humiliation, but with that heavy, quiet ache that came from having lived long enough to be dismissed by those who thought they'd never grow old. Sergeant Reyes snapped his eyes toward the noise, his jaw grinding. "Something funny, Private." Tanaka's smile collapsed. "No, Sergeant." "Good, then maybe you can brief us all. Optimal route to observation point Gamma." Tanaka straightened, relieved to showcase what he trusted, data. His finger slid across the glowing screen of his navigation suite. "Yes, Sergeant. Direct path bearing 2907. Avoids the marshland to the south. Minimal elevation gain. ETA 1700 hours." Reyes gave a curt nod. The recruits looked smug. They had their certainty back. Then, soft and level, from the other side of the tent. "That route will fail." It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But the words hit like stones dropped in still water, rippling silence across the tent. Every head turned. Ray stiffened. He looked at the older woman. "Excuse me, ma'am." Anya kept her eyes on the map. Her voice remained calm, her accent faint and unplaceable. "The satellite data is incomplete. It shows the ground, but not the history of the ground. That path crosses the old Savigrad line. The drainage culverts there collapsed during the winter floods 3 years ago. What your tablet calls a creek bed is now a sinkhole, 6 meters deep, filled with liquid mud. You will lose your light vehicles." The recruits shifted, discomfort stirring beneath their skin. They didn't believe her. They couldn't. Their data was perfect, updated hourly. How could an old woman with cloth and ink know more? The tent flap burst open. Authority swept in with the storm. Colonel Marcus Thorne, every crease in his immaculate uniform sharp as a blade. His presence carried silence with it. Even the rain outside seemed to hush. He didn't look at Anya, not at first. He surveyed the recruits, the glowing tablets, then Sergeant Reyes. Only then did his gaze land on her, flat, dismissive, as though she were not a person but an inconvenience. "Sergeant," he clipped, "report, are we ready to move?" "Almost, sir," Reyes replied, spine ramrod straight. "Finalizing the route with the trainees and consultant." A humorless curl touched the colonel's lips. "Ah, the consultant." His eyes flicked toward the cloth map, amusement hardening into disdain. "I was expecting someone conversant with 21st century technology. We have real-time satellite imagery, thermal overlays, radar. I'm not sure what that artifact can offer us." The recruits leaned into the sound of his voice, authority validating their mockery. Anya finally looked up. Her eyes, pale and washed-out blue, swept across them, not unkind, not angry, but heavy. The weight of years pressed behind them. It offers memory, she said simply. The colonel's brow arched. Memory. She touched the map with a reverent hand. Satellites see what is. They don't see what was. They don't show the farmer who buried his dead mule in that field 50 years ago, leaving a soft patch of earth that swallows tires. They don't show the forgotten trench, now hidden under weeds, still hollow beneath. This map remembers. Her voice was even patient, teaching. But Thorne had no patience for philosophy. His jaw clenched. This is a military operation, not an archaeological dig. We rely on facts. Sergeant Ray's proceed with Private Tanaka's route. Efficient, reliable, quantifiable. The dismissal was final. He turned and left without another glance. Ray's eyes softened, a flicker of apology, but orders were orders. His bark snapped across the recruits louder than before. Pack it up, move. The tent buzzed alive with energy. They scrambled, triumphant smirks darted like knives. The old woman put in her place. Anya folded her map, slowly, carefully, not in anger, not in defeat, but with reverence. Every crease was a memory. She slid it back into her worn leather satchel, her pale eyes drifting toward the open flap to the bruised purple clouds gathering above the western ridge. She smelled the air, wet iron in the soil. The technology forecast light showers. She knew better. The storm was coming. The convoy rolled out. Light armored vehicles churned through tall grass, engines growling. In the lead, Colonel Thorne sat beside the driver, tablet glowing flawless lines of blue across his screen. Certainty wrapped him like armor. At the rear, Anya sat in a troop transport. She had been offered a seat up front, a courtesy she refused. The back was better. From there she could watch. She could see the land they tore through, the tracks they left. The displaced water, the color of the mud, the birds flying low toward thicker cover. All signs, all warnings. The recruits beside her were loud again, flushed with the ease of victory, joking, betting arrival times. They didn't see the storm gathering. They didn't care. Their world was lit blue by tablets. They trusted it. They were safe. Anya looked at them, then at the land beyond the glass. Her face was unreadable, but inside, something deep and weary stirred. A familiar ache. They were too young to know the ground remembers. And the ground was about to remind them. She leaned forward slightly, eyes narrowing at a patch of land ahead, a simple depression, greener weeds, nothing the sensors flagged. But she remembered. A faded cross on her map. A farmer's story decades old, told over a chipped cup of bitter tea. A mule's grave. The lead vehicle rolled across it without trouble. The second, the third. For a moment she wondered if memory was playing tricks on her. Maybe time had healed it. Maybe she was wrong. Then the fourth truck hit. A sickening lurch. A wheel swallowed whole. The engine howled, mud fountaining. The convoy ground to a halt. Anya closed her eyes briefly. Not satisfaction, not victory, only inevitability. The drizzle began soft at first, then harder, sheets of water slamming the valley. Thunder cracked overhead, rattling every bolt in the vehicles. Communications fizzled and died. GPS cut to black. The blue line vanished. The recruits' laughter vanished with it. And in that silence, cold, wet, shivering silence, they looked not at their tablets but at the old woman with the map. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She only looked out at the storm and whispered almost to herself. The ground remembers. How long can silence last before it turns into fear? The storm answered for them. It pressed down on the valley with the weight of 1,000 fists, every drop of rain a drumbeat on steel and skin. What had started as drizzle was now a deluge. The hills blurred into shadows, the world reduced to water and mud and noise. Inside the command vehicle, Colonel Thorne's knuckles whitened against the console. His tablet was dark, dead. He slammed his fist against the wall once, twice, as though sheer force might bring the satellites back online. "Comms are gone, sir," the operator shouted, voice almost drowned by the rain hammering against metal. "Primary, secondary, backup link, total blackout." What about navigation? GPS is offline. No signal, nothing but dead pixels. The colonel's eyes burned with fury. Not at the storm, not at the mud, at himself, at the silence of his machines. His certainty had collapsed, just like the truck behind them sinking deeper into the earth. At the rear, Anya sat motionless, water dripping down her face. She had said nothing since the truck fell. She didn't need to. Every recruit's pale eyes flicked toward her, not with respect, not yet, but with the raw, dawning terror that she might have been right. Tanaka clutched his useless tablet like a child clutching a broken toy. He stared at it as if sheer will might resurrect the blue line that had once given him confidence. But no light came, only the reflection of his own fear. Ray's barked orders, his voice nearly swallowed by the storm. Ropes lashed, engines roared. Soldiers shouted, pushing, pulling, trying to drag the heavy truck from the sucking mud. But with every effort the vehicle only sank deeper. Fuel wasted, hope wasted, time bleeding out into the storm. Thorne's voice finally cut across radios, sharp and cold. "Leave it. All personnel rally at the command vehicle, now." The order cracked like a whip. Soldiers abandoned the truck, slipping through mud, forming a miserable, dripping cluster around their colonel. Their uniforms clung to them, soaked through. Their eyes flicked constantly to the man who was supposed to lead them out, and for the first time they saw hesitation in him. Ray spread out a standard-issue map across the hood of the vehicle, raindrops soaking through its flimsy paper. His voice was low, steady, but fraying. "Original extractions impossible now. We lost too much time. To get there, we'd have to cross the Blackwater tributary. In this rain," he shook his head, "it's a torrent." Thorne's finger traced east. "What about through the Spur Valley Pass? It's longer, but terrain looks stable. Leads to secondary extraction. Grid 88 Delta." A young intelligence officer shifted uneasily. His throat bobbed. "Sir, initial intel briefings noted rumors about a Spur Valley." Thorne's eyes snapped up knife-sharp. "Rumors." The lieutenant swallowed hard. "Old reports from the Servan conflict. Retreating partisans mined the valley. They called it the Ghost Fields." The word spread like contagion. Ghost Fields. No one spoke, but every face in the circle tightened. Images bloomed in their minds. The unseen, the buried, the indiscriminate terror of mines beneath mud. A death you couldn't see, couldn't fight. Thorne's jaw clenched. Options evaporated. South was a raging river. North, mountains too steep. Behind, the sea of mud. Forward, ghost fields. The storm roared, thunder rolling like artillery overhead. His own reflection stared back at him from the soaked map, eyes hollow, caught between pride and despair. Then came a voice, quiet, firm. It cut through rain and thunder with the precision of a blade. "There is a way." Every head turned. Anya Petrova stood just outside the circle, hair plastered to her scalp, rain dripping down her face. Her leather satchel hung at her side. She wasn't looking at their maps. She wasn't looking at Thorne. Her gaze was locked on the valley mouth itself, distant, as though she saw something none of them could. The recruits shifted, fear and disbelief mingling. Tanaka's lips parted, words caught in his throat. The old woman again. The relic, but there was something different now, something in her stance, in her certainty. She stepped forward. No hesitation, no request for permission, just quiet purpose. She placed the satchel on the vehicle hood, unbuckled it, and unrolled her cloth map beside Thorne's rain-smeared issue printout. The contrast was brutal. One was lifeless, printed, soaked, bleeding ink. The other hand-marked, stitched with memory, worn by years of human touch. "The ghost fields are real," she said, her voice steady. "But sown like seeds, that is myth. No soldier wastes assets that way. There is always logic, always a reason." Her finger touched the cloth, pale, steady, tracing faded lines almost invisible to the untrained eye. Symbols, notations, a thin, meandering path. Colonel Thorne stared, his disbelief fighting against the desperation in his chest. "What is this? What am I looking at?" "A memory," Anya said softly. Then, with a weight that stilled the circle, "I was here when they laid them." Silence, thunder filled the gap. "You," Thorne's voice faltered, "you were here." Her pale eyes lifted. "Part of the unit that tracked the partisans. We learned their patterns. They had no engineers, no survey equipment. They used what the land gave them, always logic, always signs." She pointed at a circle with a dot. "Weeping stones. Granite boulders that seep water, permanent landmarks. 3 mines 10 paces north every time." She moved to a triangle. "Lightning-scarred pines. They believed lightning sanctified the ground. They never mined within sight of one." Her finger traced the thin path. "This line, it respects the stones, it follows the trees. It is not straight, it is not efficient, but it is safe." The recruits leaned closer, fear mingling with awe. Private Tanaka's breath hitched. She wasn't just guessing. She knew. She had seen it. Thorne's mind screamed against it. Madness. To stake lives on old marks and superstition. Madness to trust one quiet woman against every doctrine he'd been raised on. But his machines were dead. His procedures broken. He had no path, only hers. His soldiers' eyes bored into him, waiting, pleading. He saw their fear reflected back at him, raw and desperate. He had led them here. He couldn't lead them out, not alone. Anya's gaze met his. Unshakable, not arrogant, not pleading. Just certainty deep, carved from years and scars. He thought of the sinkhole, the rain, his failure. He thought of the soldier staring at him with wide, terrified eyes. Tanaka, the boy who had laughed. No laughter now. Only hope clinging to him like a drowning man. "All right," Thorne breathed. It tasted like surrender and like salvation. "We do it your way." The recruits exhaled as one. Not relief, not yet. Only the grim weight of trust. Thorne straightened, voice hardening again, authority reclaimed but reshaped. "On foot. Single file, no talking, no electronics, eyes forward. You step exactly where the person before you steps. Sergeant Reyes, you take the rear. I'll be behind our guide." He turned to her, "Lead the way." Anya gave a single nod. She folded her map and pressed it against her chest beneath her rain-soaked jacket. She didn't need to look at it again. The path was etched into her bones. She stepped into the rain, into the valley's open mouth. Behind her the colonel followed, then the recruits, a long serpent of silence, every step heavier than the last. No one laughed now. And for the first time, they prayed the old map was right. What does it feel like to walk where the earth itself might kill you? They found out the moment the valley swallowed them. The storm quieted as they passed between the dark pillars of rock, like stepping from one world into another. The roar of rain was muffled by the valley walls. The air grew dense, heavy, cold. Sound carried differently here, every drip, every breath echoed like a warning. The ground was treacherous, black soil slick with moss, stones scattered like forgotten bones. Every shadow looked like a trap. Every rock seemed suspicious. Even the silence had weight. Anya Petrova walked first, silver hair plastered against her scalp, rain streaming from her chin. She moved with deliberate rhythm, heel to toe, soft, measured. Her eyes weren't on the ground at her feet but 30 meters ahead, scanning the terrain, reading signs invisible to everyone else. She was looking for memory, for ghosts. Behind her, Colonel Thorne stepped where she stepped, his boots sinking into her prints. A man used to commanding from above, now reduced to mimicry, humbling, necessary. He didn't let himself think about the soldiers behind him. He didn't dare. The recruits filed in single line, weapons hugged tight to their chests. Their breaths came fast, loud in their own ears. Every drop of rain down their necks felt like a trigger brushing skin. Their world had collapsed into one rule: put your foot exactly where hers had been. Nothing more, nothing less. Tanaka's heart hammered so hard it drowned out thought. He stared at Anya's back like it was the only thing tethering him to life. He copied her gait, the subtle roll of her foot, the way she tested the ground before committing weight. He tried to breathe steady, but panic clawed at him, whispering, "One wrong step. 1 inch. That's all it takes." They walked in silence, the line winding like a dark thread through the valley. Then Anya stopped. A chain of stillness froze down the column. Not a sound, not a movement. Soldiers held their breath as though even air might trigger something beneath the soil. She stood before a granite boulder, rain-slick, streaked dark where water seeped from a fissure near its base. A weeping stone. She tilted her head, listening, counting in her mind. Then, with calm precision, she stepped 10 paces left, away from the boulder. The line followed, every movement exact, every heartbeat pounding against ribcage like muffled drums. They continued. Another pause. A lightning-scarred pine loomed, trunk blackened, split down its middle. Anya circled it wide, her path curving in a graceful arc. The recruits followed, fear etched into every motion. Time dissolved. Minutes felt like hours. The valley stretched endlessly. Rain dripped from branches, slid down helmets, traced cold lines down spines. Every sense screamed danger. Then it happened. Private Duboce stumbled. Just a loose rock, slick underfoot, but enough. A sharp gasp tore from her lips as her boot slipped off the path, landing 6 inches into moss. The sound of the gasp was like a shot. The line froze, eyes widened. Tanaka felt ice surge through his veins, his stomach dropped. Anya didn't turn. Her voice cut through the storm, calm, low, absolute. "Do not move, Private." Duboce's chest heaved, panic threatening to consume her. "I ca." "Yes, you can." Anya retraced her steps 2 paces back, feet unfaltering, her own prints easy, certain. She stood beside Duboce, pale eyes locking onto the girl's wild ones. "Lift your foot, straight up, slowly." Duboce shook her head, tears mixing with rain. "It'll." "Look at me," Anya interrupted. Not harsh, firm, anchoring. Her hand gripped Duboce's arm, steady, grounding. "Breathe and lift." For a moment, the world held its breath with her. Duboce's boot rose, trembling, inch by inch. Beneath it, the moss peeled back, metal glinted, a rusted disc, 3 prongs jutting like broken teeth. A mine old, corroded, but alive or dead no one knew. Duboce's eyes flooded with terror. Anya pulled her gently back onto the path, each motion deliberate. Only when Duboce's feet were secure did Anya release her grip. She looked down the line, eyes sweeping every soldier. Calm, stern. "The earth does not forget, do not get careless." Not a single recruit dared move without absolute focus after that. They marched on. The path was a maddening zigzag, defying logic, weaving in strange patterns. It felt endless. Shoulders ached from tension, jaws locked from clenching, every nerve frayed. But the rhythm of Anya's stride kept them alive, 1 step at a time, 1 heartbeat at a time. When they finally reached the valley's edge, dusk had fallen. The rain had thinned to a drizzle, mist clinging to the ground like smoke. Beyond lay marshland, and in the distance, faint, blinking lights of secondary extraction. Relief swept the platoon like a wave, staggering, overwhelming. Soldiers slumped against trees, helmets tilting back, some collapsing into mud just to breathe. Duboce sat trembling, face pale, hands gripping her rifle like it was the only solid thing in the world. Tanaka sank to his knees, staring at Anya's back. She hadn't collapsed. She hadn't even slowed. She stood looking back into the valley, alone, unmoved, her presence like stone. For the recruits, the valley was a nightmare survived. For her, it was memory revisited. They had laughed at her map. Now every one of them owed their life to it. Who was she really? The question began whispering through the soldiers even before the valley was behind them. Relief had come in waves, but beneath it, curiosity gnawed at them. The old woman hadn't just known the path, she had walked it with certainty, like someone who had done it before. Colonel Thorne didn't voice the thought aloud. Not yet. He stood stiffly near the communications operator, mud clinging to his uniform, waiting for the backup radio to claw through the storm's interference. His soldiers were alive, barely, but his pride was in tatters. He had led them into failure, then handed them over to her, to a civilian, to someone he had dismissed. The static on the radio broke with a fractured voice. The operator leaned in, brow furrowed. "Command, this is Victor Actual requesting file check Petrova, Anya Petrova, civilian consultant." The reply was patchwork, words torn by static. "No active file under that name. Cross-referencing, standby." Thorne folded his arms. Rain dripped down his face, his jaw locked, his eyes never leaving the silver-haired figure who stood a few paces away. She wasn't with the others, wasn't collapsing in relief or shaking in exhaustion. She stood apart still, watching the valley they had survived, like she was listening to the ground itself breathe. The operator's head snapped up, eyes wide. The voice from command was clearer now. "Found a match. Sealed Servon conflict records, asset designation Veles, deep reconnaissance, pathfinding, credited with Coral Pass evacuation. 300 civilians through unmapped minefields. Record sealed under National Security Directive 7. The words fell into the mud like thunder. "Veles," the operator whispered. "Did he say Veles?" The recruits heard it. The name rippled through them. Tanaka's throat tightened. Duboce's eyes widened. Even Ray's, stoic and grim, froze at the sound. Veles wasn't real. She couldn't be. At the academy, they told ghost stories of a pathfinder who walked where no one dared, who guided convoys through invisible death. A shadow who appeared, saved lives, then vanished into rumor. Some said Veles was myth, a code name, a fabrication to lift morale. Others swore he or she had been flesh and blood, but no one believed the legend was alive. Thorne's chest tightened as the truth sharpened like ice. He looked at her, not as a relic now, not as a bureaucratic imposition, but as a living echo of every whispered story. Veles, the woman who had been mocked, dismissed, laughed at, was the very ghost they'd been raised on. The recruits shifted uneasily, shame burning hotter than the cold rain. They remembered their laughter in the tent, the smirks, the whispered jokes. Now those moments felt like sacrilege. Anya Veles turned her head slightly. Her pale eyes swept across them, not triumphant, not condemning, just steady. The gaze of someone who had seen too much to need validation. The soldiers couldn't meet it. Tanaka's chest felt hollow. Duboce's eyes welled. They had mocked a legend. The low thump of rotor blades grew louder, breaking the heavy silence. 2 helicopters appeared out of the mist, landing lights cutting through the darkness. Extraction had arrived. Rays moved quickly, organizing boarding. No cheers, no shouts of relief, just quiet obedience. The storm had wrung them dry. Thorne didn't follow immediately. His boots carried him across the mud, stopping in front of her. The wind from the rotors whipped his soaked uniform against his frame. For a moment, he didn't speak. What words could possibly carry the weight of his humiliation, his awe, his respect? So instead he straightened, shoulders back, and raised his hand in a slow, deliberate salute. Not command to subordinate, not empty ritual, a salute of reverence, of equality, of apology. Rain dripped down his brow as he held it. Anya didn't return it. She was no soldier, but she gave a small nod, almost imperceptible, acknowledgement enough. The recruits saw, and one by one, like a quiet chain reaction, they followed their colonel, helmets tilted, hands raised, mud-streaked, bone-weary. They saluted her, not because they were told, but because something inside demanded it. Respect for knowledge, for courage, for dignity that didn't ask, didn't beg, didn't shout. Only acted. And in the cold, wet clearing, the laughter from the briefing tent felt 1,000 years away. What happens after survival, when silence returns? The helicopters churned the air into chaos, rotor wash tearing at jackets, stinging eyes with grit. Soldiers boarded in order, Rays guiding them with firm, quiet authority. There was no cheering, no triumphant relief. They moved like shadows, weighed down by what they had seen, by what they had nearly lost. Tanaka paused at the ramp, glancing back. The colonel still stood at attention, hand raised in a perfect salute to the old woman, and she, Anya Petrova Veles, met it with only a small nod. Tanaka's throat tightened. Shame burned hot in his gut, remembering his jokes, his whispered cruelty. He forced himself upright, squared his shoulders, and raised his own hand in salute. Duboce followed, trembling, her eyes raw with tears. She saluted too, then another soldier, and another, until every recruit waiting in the mud raised their hand, not out of discipline but out of something deeper. Rays barked once, urging them up the ramp. They went, silent, their gestures still hanging heavy in the rain-filled air. Thorne was the last aboard. He turned once more, looked at her through the mist, the woman who had been his humiliation and his salvation. He wanted to speak, but the words were stone in his throat. Instead, he simply held her gaze for a long heartbeat before disappearing inside. The ramp closed. The first helicopter rose, swallowed by cloud and night. Anya was alone. The storm had passed. Only a drizzle lingered, soft, almost forgiving. The swollen river's roar filled the distance. Crickets sang in cautious tones. The valley, dangerous and cruel hours before, lay in silence. She stood in the clearing, leather satchel heavy at her side. For a long moment she didn't move. She breathed. The air smelled of wet pine and turned earth. Clean, honest. Her fingers unbuckled the satchel and drew out the cloth map. She unfolded it with care, each crease opening like the page of a diary only she could read. In the faint starlight, she traced the lines, the symbols, the faded notations. The weeping stone, the lightning-scarred pine, the mule's grave. Every mark was a story, a face she could no longer remember, a kindness she had never forgotten. The farmer who poured bitter tea into her hands and told her of the mule. The partisan who gave her water from the weeping stone before disappearing forever into battle. The night she sheltered beneath the pine as shells lit the sky. The map was not ink and cloth. It was memory. It was proof that the earth remembers even when people forget. Her breath caught just for a moment with the weight of it. Then she folded it again, reverently, crease by crease, tucking it back into the satchel. The second helicopter's lights cut through the mist, approaching low, the smaller craft designated for support personnel. Its blades sent ripples across the puddles, whipping her silver hair loose from its bun. She didn't flinch. The world would never know her. Her name would remain buried under directives and sealed records. To them, she was a consultant. To others, a ghost. To herself, just a tired woman with a map too old to matter until it did. She turned toward the oncoming light, expression calm, dignity intact. Not triumphant, not proud, simply steady. For she knew something the young had not yet learned. Survival isn't about who speaks loudest, who looks strongest, or who holds the newest tool. It is about who listens. And in the silence between storms, the earth always whispers back. What do soldiers whisper about when the danger is past, but fear still clings? The helicopter's interior was loud, rotor thrum, metallic vibrations, the rattle of gear. Yet beneath the noise, a hush lived among the recruits. They sat strapped into benches, mud caked on their boots, helmets tilted forward. Their eyes were haunted, not from what they'd seen, but from what they'd nearly stepped on. Tanaka sat rigid, tablet forgotten in his pack. His hands wouldn't stop trembling. Across from him, Duboce stared blankly at the floor, lips moving silently as though repeating a prayer. Others avoided eye contact, each wrapped in their own private storm. But the whispers started anyway. "Did you hear the call sign?" One soldier muttered under the noise. "They said Veles." The name carried weight. Even whispered it was heavy. Heads lifted. A spark of disbelief crossed tired faces. "Veles isn't real," another said quickly, like denying it would steady their shaking hands. It's a myth." Tanaka swallowed hard. His voice cracked when he spoke. "Tell that to the mine." She pulled Duboce off. Silence followed. Even the roar of rotors couldn't cover it. They all knew. Myth or not, she had walked them through death, and that made her real. At the far end, Colonel Thorne sat ramrod straight, helmet in his lap. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes betrayed a storm of their own. Pride fractured, respect forced into place, and something heavier: shame. He had dismissed her, humiliated her, led his men into failure. And she, quiet, weathered, forgotten, had saved them all. He clenched his jaw. The academy had taught him numbers, probabilities, risk assessments. It had never taught him to listen to memory, to the weight of scars, to the whispers of the land. And yet, when his polished tools collapsed, it was memory that carried them out. Behind him, Anya sat apart. She had declined the front seats offered, choosing the rear again. She didn't close her eyes. She didn't rest. She watched the storm retreat through the open hatch, her pale gaze lost in the blur of night and cloud. To the recruits, she was legend now. To Thorne, she was a mirror he didn't want. To herself, she was just tired. Her hand rested lightly on the satchel at her side. The map was dry inside, folded and safe, etched with decades of memory. She didn't need to open it. It was part of her, stitched into bone and breath. The whispers of the young continued, fear and awe tangled in their voices. She didn't even hesitate. Like she knew every step. "How old do you think she is?" "Older than the war itself." But Anya didn't hear them, or if she did, she gave no sign. She had learned long ago that legends belong to others. To her, there was only the path, only survival. The helicopter shook as it pierced another pocket of storm. A few recruits jolted, gripping straps tighter, their nerves raw. Thorne's eyes flicked to her. She hadn't moved. Not a flinch. Not a blink. In that stillness, he saw it again. The calm of someone who had walked beside death so many times it no longer startled her. He turned away, ashamed of how small his own calm looked beside hers. Outside, the storm faded. The night sky opened, stars emerging through rips in the clouds. The valley receded into darkness, a ghost field once more. The recruits stared out the windows, each wondering if they would ever laugh the same way again. Each wondering if they would ever forget the sound of her voice, calm in the rain. The earth does not forget. And sitting alone at the rear, Anya Petrova, Veles, watched the stars as if they were landmarks on another invisible map, guiding her onward through memory. What is the price of being remembered as a ghost? The helicopter settled them onto firm ground hours later, far from the valley, far from the storm. A forward operating post, steel walls, harsh lights, mud churned into ruts by endless boots. The recruits filed out in silence, shoulders slumped, eyes hollow. They should have cheered. They should have laughed at their survival, but something in them had shifted. They walked differently now, boots heavy, as though each step remembered the valley. Colonel Thorne remained a figure of authority, but no one looked at him the same way. His clipped orders carried less certainty, his stride less iron. The image of him following an old woman through a minefield would never leave them. Rays gathered the recruits, herding them toward debriefing. Their voices were low, subdued. Tanaka kept glancing back, searching for her. Duboce followed his eyes, shame and awe written plainly across her pale face. But Anya was already walking away. She didn't wait for orders, didn't report. She slipped toward the far edge of camp, the satchel slung over her shoulder, her steps unhurried but steady. No one stopped her. No one could. Tanaka hesitated, heart pounding, then stepped out of line. "Ma'am." She turned, her pale eyes catching his. For a moment, the boy who had laughed at her in the tent could not breathe. I'm sorry," he stammered. The words sounded small, broken, but they were all he had. Her gaze softened just enough to be felt. She didn't smile, didn't speak. She simply inclined her head, a gesture that carried forgiveness without words. Then she turned again and kept walking. Tanaka stood frozen, the weight of her silence heavier than any rebuke. Duboce touched his arm lightly, her own eyes glassy. "We'll never see her again, will we?" He shook his head. "I don't think anyone ever really sees her." At the edge of camp, under a sky littered with stars, Anya paused. She drew her map from the satchel once more, unfolding it with reverence. The creases opened like scars. She traced the lines slowly, her fingers moving as though reacquainting themselves with old friends. Every mark carried a life. The mule's grave, where she had once listened to a farmer's quiet grief. The weeping stone, where a dying partisan had pressed a flask into her hands. The lightning-scarred pine, where she had hidden from artillery fire and whispered her own promises into the wind. The recruits would remember her as a ghost. The colonel would remember her as humiliation turned reverence. The records would remember her as Veli's. But the map remembered her truth, not a legend, not a phantom, but a woman who listened, who endured. The night was cold, the stars sharp. She folded the map again, each crease falling into place as if the cloth itself knew its role. She returned it to the satchel, tightened the buckle, and stood for a long moment, simply breathing. Voices carried faintly from the camp. Young soldiers, alive because of her, speaking her name like a prayer or a curse. She didn't turn back. She had no need. Legends didn't belong in the light. Her boots pressed into the dirt, steady, unshaken, carrying her into the darkness beyond the camp's glow. No one followed. No one dared. Behind her, the camp bustled back into order. Ahead of her, silence stretched, vast and familiar. And in that silence, she felt the earth whisper as it always had, as it always would. What remains when the story ends, and the silence returns? The forward base quieted as night deepened. Floodlights buzzed against the dark, and the recruits finally slept, some restless, some still trembling, their dreams tangled with shadows of the ghost fields. The camp's noise dulled into background hum, leaving pockets of stillness where memory stirred louder than machines. Anya Petrova did not join the barracks. She lingered on the edge of the compound, where the light thinned and the land began again. Her satchel rested at her side, the map inside folded like a heartbeat. She stood alone, but not lonely. In the distance, she could still hear the river swollen by the storm. The earth carried its voice through the ground, a steady reminder of how quickly landscapes could turn, how memory never washed away completely. She listened, as she always had, with the patience of someone who knew that listening was survival. Inside the base, Tanaka woke once, unable to sleep. He sat upright, staring at the wall, hearing her voice echo in his mind. The earth does not forget. It frightened him, but it steadied him too. Duboce lay beside him, eyes open, silent tears streaking her cheeks. Neither spoke, but both felt the same truth. They would carry her with them long after her footsteps faded. Colonel Thorne sat alone at a steel desk, maps spread before him, all of them gleaming with data and precision. They felt hollow now. He stared at them as if they mocked him. He had saluted her, a gesture he would never forget, though he could not explain why. His pen hovered over a report he could not write. How do you document being saved by a ghost? Beyond their walls, Anya tilted her head back to the stars. She did not seek recognition. She had never sought it. Recognition was fleeting. Names were forgotten. Myths distorted. Only the land kept its stories honest. And she would keep listening. She closed her eyes, feeling the cool night air wash over her. The map inside her satchel weighed on her shoulder like a promise, not a burden. It was not an artifact for display, not a relic for admiration. It was a tool, a life's work, a memory of ground that remembered. She took a step forward, then another, fading into the quiet beyond the lights of the camp. Behind her, the soldiers slept. Ahead of her, the earth whispered its eternal lessons. She listened, steady and unhurried as she always had. And though no one saw, though no one would ever write it in their reports, the truth remained. Sometimes dignity does not speak. It simply acts.